Miguel was just the janitor, overlooked, underpaid, invisible in the eyes of the wealthy tenants who lived in the towering apartment building he cleaned every day. His world was mop buckets and flickering hallway lights, not champagne galas and penthouse views. But when a fire erupts deep within the building's aging electrical system, trapping a woman inside a broken elevator, Miguel does the unthinkable. He charges into the smoke and flames, not for glory, not for reward, but because someone needed help. That woman, Clara Vega, the elusive, cold-hearted owner of the entire building. What begins as a desperate rescue turns into a powerful reckoning as they crawl through fires, ceiling ducts, and decades of emotional walls. Miguel and Clara discover what really matters: courage, humility, and the weight of unspoken stories. Their journey will transform them both, him from a shadow into a hero, her from an untouchable mogul into a woman forever changed by the man she almost never noticed. This isn't just a tale of survival. It's about class, redemption, and the quiet heroism that lives in the most unexpected places. The building towered above the city skyline like a monument to quiet opulence. Its windows gleamed in the early morning sun, reflecting a golden world that few could afford. Inside, marble floors whispered under expensive shoes, and the scent of fresh lilies floated through air-conditioned halls. The residents of the Avalon were doctors, lawyers, CEOs, people who bought privacy and lived above the noise. And far below them, long before dawn ever broke, Miguel Salazar unlocked the service door with practiced hands. He moved like a ghost, his footsteps soft, his motions deliberate. In his late 50s, Miguel had worked this job for nearly 20 years. Thin but strong, with graying hair tucked under a faded navy cap, he wore his uniform like a second skin. No one greeted him at that hour. No one saw the quiet ritual he performed each morning, checking hallway bulbs, unclogging drains, oiling the hinges on doors that groaned like they were haunted. He liked the stillness before the city woke up. On the 7th floor, he stopped at apartment 712. The owner always left a note. "Please check the bathroom sink." Again. Miguel sighed, unlocked the door with his master key, and stepped into the sterile silence of a luxury suite. He moved with care, placing down his bag, rolling up his sleeves. The sink hissed and gurgled like it resented him. Most of the residents didn't know his name. They barely looked at him. They'd nod sometimes, distracted by phone calls or sunglasses too big for their faces. One man once called him manual labor like it was a diagnosis. Miguel didn't mind, not really. His job was to stay out of the way. He'd learned long ago that invisibility was a kind of armor. But Miguel noticed things: cracks in marble, frayed wires hidden in elevator shafts, faulty circuits that buzzed behind pristine walls. He kept a small notepad in his pocket, logging each issue no one else seemed to care about. He had reported the flickering lights near the elevator bank 3 times now. Management had shrugged. "We'll get to it. Not urgent." But something about it gnawed at him. At 6:45 a.m., he wheeled his cart to the lobby. The floor manager, Curtis, was sipping a latte and scrolling on his tablet. Miguel gave him a quiet nod. Curtis glanced up. "Morning, Mike." "It's Miguel," he corrected softly. Curtis didn't hear, or pretended not to. A ding echoed through the lobby as the main elevator opened. A woman stepped out, dragging a designer suitcase, tall, elegant, wrapped in a flowing cream trench coat. sharp eyes under expensive sunglasses. Her heels clicked like punctuation marks. Staff at the concierge desk straightened instantly. Miguel recognized her from a photo in the building's leasing office. Clara Vega, the owner. He'd only seen her once in person years ago. She looked older now, colder, a living contradiction, barely present, yet omnipresent. Everything in the building bore her mark. She paused in front of him, noticing the mop in his hand. Her nose twitched faintly. Then she walked past. Not a word. Miguel lowered his gaze and resumed mopping. But something else caught his attention, the faint scent of burning plastic, barely noticeable. He sniffed again. The elevator lights flickered once, then steadied. Miguel frowned and jotted it down. Later, in the break room, he flipped open his notebook. 4 previous notes about elevator malfunctions. He underlined the last one twice. His gut said something wasn't right, but management didn't pay janitors to have instincts. He stared at the paper cup of instant coffee cooling in front of him. Outside, the sun was fully up now, painting the skyline in color. He could hear the buzz of daily life starting to thrum through the walls, the click of laptop keys, the hiss of espresso machines, the soft groan of elevators rising and falling. And in the middle of it all, Miguel stayed quiet, mending what was broken, protecting people who never saw him. But trouble was brewing. He just didn't know yet how close the fire already was. Miguel knew the building better than anyone. Not just the apartments with their granite countertops and stainless steel appliances. He knew the forgotten places, the crawl spaces, the boiler room, the hollow crawl behind the laundry chute. He knew where condensation pooled on pipe joints, where rats tried to nest, and which outlets sparked if you plugged in a vacuum just the wrong way. Every day he found something small, another sign that the Aveline's polished perfection was slowly unraveling beneath the surface. Today, it was the service stairwell on the east wing. He spotted the frayed insulation first, tucked behind a metal panel. A bundle of wires, scorched black around the edges, sat too close to a corroded junction box. He didn't like the smell. It had that acidic, melting odor that whispered danger. He snapped a photo on his old phone, added it to his folder of ignored warnings, and walked back toward the maintenance office. He tried Curtis again. "Elevator's still acting up," Miguel said, showing him the picture. Curtis didn't look up from his tablet. "Look, man, the board isn't spending another dime unless something actually breaks. It passed the last inspection. Maybe try the power wash on the lobby tiles today, okay?" Miguel hesitated. "Curtis, if this stuff catches, you gonna pay for the rewiring yourself?" Miguel closed his mouth. He walked away with that photo still burning a hole in his phone's memory. Down in the basement, the building hummed with quiet, unseen life. Boilers ticked, generators whispered. A low, steady drone of electricity vibrated the concrete. Miguel opened a locked closet and retrieved a small red toolbox with a name etched into the side. Rafael Salazar, his father's. He traced the letters for a moment, breathing in the scent of old metal and engine oil. His father had been a janitor, too. He used to say, "Buildings have souls, Miguel. You take care of them, and they take care of the people inside." Miguel looked up at the pipe system overhead. There was a faint shimmer of heat rising off the wiring running along the main wall. He touched one of the panels. Warm, too warm. The building was speaking. No, warning, but no one wanted to listen. By noon, tenants were pouring out of apartments headed to offices, brunches, and shopping districts. The building buzzed with chatter and perfume and clicking heels. Miguel slipped behind them, picking up dropped keys, wiping away invisible fingerprints. Always watching, always fixing, always 5 steps behind, and always unseen. It wasn't that people were cruel, they just didn't see him. Miguel stood in the back hallway near the elevators as 2 residents argued over wine deliveries. One man waved his phone in frustration, while the other adjusted his designer scarf. Neither noticed Miguel fixing the emergency light above their heads. When they finally walked away, Miguel climbed down his stepladder, rubbed a sore spot on his back, and returned the tools to his cart. "Excuse me?" He turned. An elderly woman with a walker gave him a hesitant smile. "I'm sorry, but I think my stove is leaking gas again. I hate to bother you." "You're not bothering me, Mrs. Epstein," he said kindly. "I'll check it right now." She smiled, grateful. One of the few who still remembered his name. Inside her apartment, the air was faintly sharp, the kind of smell that made your brain squint. He checked the burners, then the line under the oven. Sure enough, loose again. A few minutes with a wrench and some thread sealant, and the leak was gone. He opened the windows and let the air clear. "You saved me again," Mrs. Epstein said. "They should pay you double, you know." He smiled. "Don't hold your breath." As he walked out, she called after him, "You're a good man, Miguel. You don't fool me." Later that afternoon, he caught a glimpse of Clara Vega again. She was walking with a man in a tailored navy suit, her lawyer, maybe, or an investor. She seemed to glide more than walk, her heels tapping like a metronome of money and power. She stopped suddenly and turned toward the service elevator. Miguel was inside, replacing the ceiling light. She didn't look up, just waited for the elevator to arrive, arms crossed. Then, just before the doors opened, she looked straight at him. Their eyes met. Briefly. Miguel gave a small nod. She didn't return it. When the doors shut again, he sighed and returned to his work. He was used to being invisible. It didn't hurt anymore, not really. But something about the way she looked at him, sharp, calculating, just a little uncertain, lingered with him for the rest of the day. Because for the first time in years, someone like her had seen him. Even if it was only for a moment. By the end of the week, the Avaline was humming with whispers. Clara Vega was back, for real this time. No quick flyby visit, no anonymous proxy. Residents speculated in hushed tones in the lounge. Some claimed she was there to sell the property. Others swore she was considering a full renovation, turning the historic structure into some gleaming, soulless tech tower. But no one really knew. She was a mystery wrapped in tailored fabric and sharp perfume, walking the halls with silence that seemed louder than conversation. Miguel didn't believe in gossip. He believed in work, and right now that meant unclogging a backed-up trash chute and sanitizing a foul-smelling water tank in the east stairwell. Still, he couldn't help but notice the changes. Management scurried like ants before a thunderstorm. Fresh flowers were delivered every morning to the lobby. The concierge suddenly wore white gloves. Then one morning, as Miguel mopped near the mailroom, Clara's voice floated through the air. "Number not that tile. The contrast is wrong. I want elegance, not a hotel lobby." Miguel turned just enough to catch a glimpse. She stood beside a trembling decorator, gesturing toward the floor. Her face was stern, but her eyes were somewhere else. Haunted, maybe. Tired. She walked past Miguel again, this time her gaze flickering over him briefly. He didn't expect recognition, and he didn't get any. But something had shifted. She wasn't just passing through. She was watching now. Later that day, Miguel saw her again, this time alone. She stood in the elevator, staring at the ceiling, her hand hovering near the close door button. Miguel entered the lobby at that exact moment, hands full of toolboxes. Their eyes met. She hesitated. Then, unexpectedly, she pressed the open door button. Miguel stepped inside slowly. The silence was immediate and loud. "Floor?" she asked, her voice clipped. "Service level, basement." She nodded, pressed the button. The elevator began its slow descent. Miguel cleared his throat. Elevator's been acting strange lately, lights flickering. Sometimes the panel doesn't respond. "Has it been logged?" "4 times, he replied. She looked at him, sharp now. "And management hasn't done anything." The elevator jolted faintly. Her fingers tensed around her handbag. Miguel noticed. "Don't worry, still stable, for now," he added. She said nothing else. The doors opened. He stepped out. As they closed behind him, he could still feel her watching. It started with a hiss, a subtle one, too low for most ears, like the sound of a snake exhaling. Miguel heard it just outside the elevator panel on the 4th floor. He crouched beside it, pulled off the cover, and saw a tiny coil of smoke curl up from a blackened wire. Not good. He reached for his phone and snapped another photo. That made 5 documented signs now. Still no repairs, no outside inspection scheduled. He picked up his walkie and called Curtis. "Got smoke near the elevator junction at 4. Wiring's heating again." Curtis groaned. "You're still on that?" "It's getting worse." "Look, man, unless flames are pouring out, I'm not putting in a formal request. Not with Clara in the building. She'll rip my head off if there's noise." Miguel gritted his teeth. "There will be flames soon if we don't—" Curtis cut him off. "Drop it." Click. Miguel stared at the wall for a long time. That night he returned after hours. It was quiet, just the low hum of refrigeration units and the occasional thud of distant pipes expanding in the night. He brought his father's toolbox and opened the elevator panel again, flashlight in his teeth. What he saw made his stomach drop. Multiple wires were scorched, not just one. Some had melted entirely, the plastic curling back like burned paper. Others had begun to fuse together, a slow, deadly dance of electricity trying to jump its cage. And the insulation was practically dust in some places. He exhaled. It was a miracle nothing had happened yet. He knew he couldn't fix it properly, not alone, not without shutting down the entire grid for the wing, but he could insulate the worst spots, try to redirect some of the load, just enough to buy time. He worked for hours, hands blackened, sweat dripping down his spine. When he finally emerged, he looked up at the elevator, its silent steel doors reflecting his exhausted face. "Hang in there," he muttered. Upstairs in the dark, Clara Vega stood in her penthouse, staring out at the city skyline. The lights below glittered like stars, but her mind wasn't on the view. She couldn't sleep. Something felt fragile. Office, like she was standing on glass that had already cracked underfoot. She didn't know yet that fire had already begun to thread itself into the veins of her building, or that the man trying to stop it was the one she'd walked past 100 times without seeing. But she would soon, and by then everything would be burning. The next morning began like any other, sunlight spilling over steel and glass, the scent of espresso and ambition curling through the lobby air. Tenants moved like clockwork. Packages were delivered, dogs were walked, lives continued. But Miguel watched the elevator like a hawk. He hovered by the service closet on the 4th floor, listening each time the cables groaned. The system wasn't just aging, it was failing. The insulation tape he'd used last night wouldn't hold much longer. He filed one final report, handwritten, delivered directly to Curtis's office. Curtis didn't even glance at it. "Didn't I tell you to let it go?" Miguel stiffened. "This isn't a clogged drain. That thing's a coffin waiting to close." "You're being dramatic," Curtis said, waving him off. "It's not your job to fix the electrical. That's why we have insurance." Miguel's jaw clenched. "And that'll comfort someone's family when it goes up in smoke." Curtis's eyes narrowed. "Careful, Miguel. You're just the janitor." Later that afternoon, Clara entered the lobby with a tablet in hand. She was focused, frustrated. The building's Wi-Fi had gone down twice, and an important call had just dropped. She needed to get to the penthouse, now. "Elevator," she said curtly to the concierge. "Service elevators faster today, ma'am. Passengers been stopping between floors." She raised a brow. "Then it should have been shut down." The concierge winced. She turned and headed for it anyway. Miguel had just exited the elevator shaft on the 6th floor. He'd been inspecting the shaft casing, checking the wiring again. The car had passed him by minutes ago. He was sweating, dirty, and worried. Then he saw her, Clara Vega, stepping into the elevator with all the confidence of a queen entering her carriage. "No, wait!" he called. She looked at him, brow arched. "Don't use it," he said, breathless. "It's unstable." Her eyes swept over his soiled uniform. "Then tell someone who handles the elevators." "I am telling them, you." "Noted," she said, and pressed the button. The doors slid shut. Miguel stood frozen. Then the elevator lights flickered again, and this time they didn't come back. It started in the walls, quietly, invisibly, like a whisper with teeth. A wire arced, a spark leapt to exposed insulation, heat bloomed, the hiss turned to a pop. Then a small flame, dancing deep in the dark, ignited a cluster of dry cable sleeves and dust. On the 5th floor, behind the control room, the fire began to crawl. Within minutes, smoke snaked through the walls. Sensors flickered but didn't engage. The emergency power backup had already failed the previous week, another report buried in non-urgent status. The elevator stopped between floors. Clara jolted as the lights snapped out. The car shook slightly, then nothing. She pressed the alarm. Silence. The call button. No tone. Just darkness and the rising scent of heat. Miguel heard it before anyone else. That wrong silence. The way a building holds its breath when something's not right. Then the alarm. Faint, late, almost embarrassed. He ran. Down the hallway, down the stairwell, past confused tenants poking heads from doors. He saw smoke bleeding from under the 5th floor electrical room. He cursed, shoved open the control panel, and nearly dropped his flashlight. Flames were climbing the wall. No suppression system, no alarms from the shaft. And then he realized the elevator. He bolted to the control panel. The screen was blank, dead, but the logs showed one last command before failure. Penthouse. Clara. His blood froze. He didn't hesitate. He grabbed a crowbar, his gloves, and a fire extinguisher. Heart pounding, legs flying, he charged up the maintenance stairs, past the crawling smoke, past logic, past fear. Inside the stuck elevator, Clara pounded the door once. Nothing. The air was growing thicker, a metallic taste on her tongue. She pulled off her coat and tied it around her face. She was shaking. This wasn't supposed to happen, not to her. Then, clanging, outside. "Miss Vega, can you hear me?" A voice, muffled. "Yes," she screamed, coughing. "I'm getting you out." More banging, metal groaning, and then light. A sliver, then a hand. His hand, Miguel. Covered in soot, eyes blazing. "Move back," he yelled. One swing, two. The doors finally cracked, and just as the fire alarm truly blared to life, the flames finding oxygen and the hallway began to smoke. He pulled her out. The moment Clara's feet hit the floor outside the elevator, a fresh wave of smoke surged from the hallway vents. It was thicker now, angrier. Red strobe lights spun lazily from the ceiling, casting shadows like ghosts on the walls. "Stay low," Miguel barked. Clara coughed violently, doubling over, her elegant cream blouse streaked with soot. Miguel grabbed her arm and pulled her down beside him. They crawled. The hallway was choking with smoke, the fire roaring behind them. Somewhere, a pipe burst with a shriek, unleashing scalding steam that hissed down the corridor. "Where's the fire escape?" Clara gasped. "Backdraft probably hit it," Miguel said. "Too dangerous. We take the ducts." "The ducts?" "Trust me." Clara looked at him, wide-eyed, her corporate armor cracking under pressure. For the first time, she looked human, terrified and unsure. Miguel pulled them both toward a utility closet. Inside was a maintenance hatch, barely 2 feet wide. He'd used it before, once to rescue a trapped cat, once to chase a runaway kid. He never thought he'd use it to save the building's owner. He opened the hatch, shoved the extinguisher in first, then turned to her. "Ladies first." Clara hesitated. "This is insane." Miguel grinned grimly. "Welcome to my world." She climbed in. Behind them, the fire made its move. It surged through the wiring like a serpent, slithering into paneling, biting at dry insulation. Explosions popped in the walls, small ones at first, like the snapping of knuckles, then louder. Glass shattered somewhere above. A tenant screamed. The building, so pristine, so perfect, was groaning under pressure. Decades of neglect, of patch jobs and cover-ups, were finally coming due. Miguel knew they had minutes, maybe less. They crawled through the ductwork, the space barely wide enough to move. Clara struggled, her hands shook, her designer shoes caught on the metal lips of the duct. Miguel reached back, guided her silently. "You okay?" he asked. "No," she snapped, her voice ragged. "Good," he replied. "Means you're still alive." They emerged into a darkened service hallway on the 6th floor, just beyond the blaze, but the smoke was still spreading. They could hear the building's old ventilation system drawing the fire higher. Miguel leaned against the wall, breathing hard. Clara collapsed beside him. "How did this happen?" she asked. Miguel looked at her. "I've been trying to tell them. The systems are old, worn out. Reports got ignored." Clara looked down. She said nothing, because somewhere, deep down, she knew it was true. They had one floor to go. The roof was accessible from the 7th floor through the service stairwell. Miguel hoped the fire hadn't reached it yet. "We move fast," he said. "Smoke's thinning, bad sign, means the fire's moving up." Clara nodded, no longer questioning his lead. They climbed slowly. The hallway was dim, light fixtures flickering like dying stars. On the 7th floor landing, Miguel froze. The hallway ahead was already glowing orange. The fire had beaten them. "No," he muttered, "we need that stairwell." Clara looked at him. "Then we go through it." Miguel shook his head. "No time. We won't make it." She turned on him. "What's the other option?" Miguel looked back toward the shaft. He could try to drop down one level, use the emergency ladder inside the service elevator shaft to get her out through the 3rd floor access. But it meant splitting up, and he wasn't sure she'd survive the climb alone. Miguel looked into Clara's eyes. "I can get you out," he said, "but you have to trust me completely." "I do," she whispered. "Just don't leave me." He didn't answer, because at that moment he was already deciding something else. He wasn't going to leave anyone behind. They turned back toward the maintenance stairwell, only to find a boy, maybe 10 years old, clutching a toy under his arm. Eyes wide, crying, Miguel's heart stopped. More residents had stayed behind than he thought. Clara gasped. He must have been trapped. Miguel scooped the boy up. New plan. "We'll never make it all the way down." Miguel's face hardened. "Then we go up." "To the roof?" He nodded. "Hope the fire department's got a ladder that long." He carried the boy in one arm, grabbed Clara's hand with the other, and ran. Through the smoke, through the heat, through the rising terror of a building finally collapsing on the weight of its neglect. And behind them, the fire followed, hungry and unrelenting. The moment Clara's feet hit the floor outside the elevator, a fresh wave of smoke surged from the hallway vents. It was thicker now, angrier. Red strobe lights spun lazily from the ceiling, casting shadows like ghosts on the walls. "Stay low," Miguel barked. Clara coughed violently, doubling over, her elegant cream blouse streaked with soot. Miguel grabbed her arm and pulled her down beside him. They crawled. The hallway was choking with smoke, the fire roaring behind them. Somewhere, a pipe burst with a shriek, unleashing scalding steam that hissed down the corridor. "Where's the fire escape?" Clara gasped. "Backdrafts probably hit it," Miguel said. "Too dangerous. We take the ducts." "The ducts?" "Trust me." Clara looked at him, wide-eyed, her corporate armor cracking under pressure. For the first time, she looked human, terrified and unsure. Miguel pulled them both toward a utility closet. Inside was a maintenance hatch, barely 2 feet wide. He'd used it before, once to rescue a trapped cat, once to chase a runaway kid. He never thought he'd use it to save the building's owner. He opened the hatch, shoved the extinguisher in first, then turned to her. "Ladies first." Clara hesitated. "This is insane." Miguel grinned grimly. "Welcome to my world." She climbed in. Behind them, the fire made its move. It surged through the wiring like a serpent, slithering into paneling, biting at dry insulation. Explosions popped in the walls, small ones at first, like the snapping of knuckles, then louder. Glass shattered somewhere above. A tenant screamed. The building, so pristine, so perfect, was groaning under pressure. Decades of neglect, of patched jobs and cover-ups, were finally coming due. Miguel knew they had minutes, maybe less. They crawled through the ductwork, the space barely wide enough to move. Clara struggled, her hands shook, her designer shoes caught on the metal lips of the duct. Miguel reached back, guided her silently. "You okay?" he asked. "No," she snapped, her voice ragged. "Good," he replied. "Means you're still alive." They emerged into a darkened service hallway on the 6th floor, just beyond the blaze, but the smoke was still spreading. They could hear the building's old ventilation system drawing the fire higher. Miguel leaned against the wall, breathing hard. Clara collapsed beside him. "How did this happen?" she asked. Miguel looked at her. "I've been trying to tell them. The systems are old, worn out. Reports got ignored." Clara looked down. She said nothing, because somewhere, deep down, she knew it was true. They had one floor to go. The roof was accessible from the 7th floor through the service stairwell. Miguel hoped the fire hadn't reached it yet. "We move fast," he said. "Smoke's thinning, bad sign, means the fire's moving up." Clara nodded, no longer questioning his lead. They climbed slowly. The hallway was dim, light fixtures flickering like dying stars. On the 7th floor landing, Miguel froze. The hallway ahead was already glowing orange. The fire had beaten them. "No," he muttered. "We need that stairwell." Clara looked at him. "Then we go through it." Miguel shook his head. "No time. We won't make it." She turned on him. "What's the other option?" Miguel looked back toward the shaft. He could try to drop down one level, use the emergency ladder inside the service elevator shaft to get her out through the 3rd floor access. But it meant splitting up, and he wasn't sure she'd survive the climb alone. Miguel looked into Clara's eyes. "I can get you out," he said, "but you have to trust me completely." "I do," she whispered. "Just don't leave me." He didn't answer, because at that moment he was already deciding something else. He wasn't going to leave anyone behind. They turned back toward the maintenance stairwell, only to find a boy, maybe 10 years old, clutching a toy under his arm, eyes wide, crying. Miguel's heart stopped. More residents had stayed behind than he thought. Clara gasped. "He must have been trapped." Miguel scooped the boy up. New plan. "We'll never make it all the way down." Miguel's face hardened. "Then we go up." "To the roof?" He nodded. "Hope the fire department's got a ladder that long." He carried the boy in one arm, grabbed Clara's hand with the other, and ran. Through the smoke, through the heat, through the rising terror of a building finally collapsing on the weight of its neglect. And behind them, the fire followed, hungry and unrelenting. The helicopter circled low above the rooftop, its blades slicing the smoky air into violent gusts. Debris scattered across the roof, paper, insulation, ash, spinning like confetti in a nightmare. Miguel stood slowly, shielding his eyes. The fire down below had not let up. If anything, it had grown angrier, now consuming the lower floors with a fury that turned glass into dust and steel into liquid memory. 2 firefighters rappelled from the chopper. Their boots thudded onto the roof like salvation. "We've got 3, one of them yelled into his radio. "Repeat, 3 evacuees, rooftop northeast quadrant." Miguel stepped back, letting them assess the boy and Clara. "She's got some smoke inhalation," he shouted, "and the kid, he's shaken, maybe dehydrated, but conscious." "What about you?" the firefighter asked. Miguel shrugged. I'm good. You're bleeding. Miguel looked down, a long scrape along his forearm. He hadn't even noticed. Doesn't matter. The firefighter turned to Clara. Ma'am, we're going to airlift you and the boy first. Sir, you'll be on the next loop. Clara looked over sharply. He comes with us. We can't. This load's full. It's protocol. I don't care about protocol, she said. He saved our lives. Miguel touched her arm. Go. She stared at him. He nodded. Go. As they lifted off, Clara pressed her hand to the window. The boy mirrored her silently. Miguel watched them vanish into the smoke-thick sky. The rooftop was suddenly quiet again. Only the fire remained. He moved quickly. There were still people inside. He was sure of it. And the firefighters didn't know about the hidden crawlspace access on the east wing, just past the old gym behind a false wall used for storage. Miguel grabbed the remaining coil of rope and a small oxygen tank from the utility shed. He checked the pressure, low but usable. He didn't hesitate. He descended back into the stairwell. The flames were eating everything now. Walls peeled open like fruit. Ceilings collapsed under their own heat. But Miguel moved like a man with purpose, sliding between fire and silence, following the map in his head that no blueprint ever recorded. Somewhere on the 5th floor he heard a voice. Faint, coughing. He followed it. It was the DeSantis couple. Elderly, both in their 70s. He found them crouched in a linen closet, faces streaked with soot, arms wrapped around each other. The man was unconscious. The woman was barely awake. Miguel knelt, checking their pulses. Alive. He whispered, "Hang on." The path back up was blocked, but he had a new idea. The elevator shaft. The fire had gutted the top, but the lower levels, he remembered, had maintenance ladders along the inner wall. Risky, but the only option. He hoisted Mr. DeSantis onto his back. Strapped with a piece of curtain cord, he scavenged from the closet. Then he took Mrs. DeSantis by the arm and led her down the hall. They reached the elevator access panel between floors. Smoke curled through the gaps like fingers. He pried it open with his crowbar, his hands now blistered, the skin raw beneath soot. The smell inside the shaft was unbearable, a chemical stench of metal and scorched air. But the ladder was still there. He didn't think so. He just moved. Step by agonizing step, he descended, Mr. DeSantis secured, Mrs. DeSantis following carefully behind, her breath rattling but determined. Halfway between the 3rd and 4th floors, a chunk of ceiling broke loose above them. Miguel heard it. He twisted, blocked the fall. The wood slammed his shoulder, nearly knocking him free. He held. Grunted, "Keep moving," he yelled. They did. By the time they reached the 3rd floor access door, his strength was nearly gone. But Clara's voice, her eyes at the moment she left him behind, flashed in his mind. And he found more. With one last kick, the door burst open. He pulled the DeSantises through and collapsed in the hall. Outside the smoke-filled window, he saw red. Fire truck ladders. They'd made it. Miguel lay on the cool tile floor of the 3rd level, lungs burning, heart pounding like a hammer in his chest. The DeSantises were coughing but alive, propped against the wall like fragile porcelain figures pulled from ruin. The sound of boots thundered down the hall. Firefighters, their helmets gleamed like salvation through the haze. "We've got 3, one shouted. Another knelt beside Miguel. "Sir, stay down. We've got you." "No," he wheezed. "Still people inside." "I saw." Unit 309. Lights were on. They haven't come out. The firefighter hesitated. We're pulling back. Orders are to evacuate. Fires breached the structural core. Miguel grabbed his coat. I'll go. You won't make it. He stood anyway. I have to try. The firefighter looked him in the eye, then pressed something into his hand, a portable oxygen mask. 15 minutes tops, he said. That's all it'll give you. Miguel nodded. He staggered back into the thickening dark, carrying not just his tools now, but every soul the building had forgotten. Unit 309's door was hot to the touch. Miguel banged on it with his fist. Fire department, anyone inside? A muffled cry answered. He dropped to his knees, used the crowbar to pry the door open. Inside, a teenage girl and her little brother crouched near a bedroom closet. The apartment was filled with smoke. The hallway carpet behind Miguel was already on fire, the flames spreading fast along the walls. He charged in, yanked towels from the bathroom, soaked them with what little water was left, and wrapped the kids in them. Stay close to me, he said. They didn't question him. Miguel led them back out, into hell. The hallway had transformed into a tunnel of fire. Sprinklers had failed. The walls groaned, plaster crumbling, paint bubbling. The smoke was so thick he couldn't see 10 feet ahead. But he remembered. Every bend, every stairwell, every door. He guided them toward the utility shaft again, back to the crawl space that had once saved Clara. The heat was unbearable. He carried the boy. The girl followed, clutching his jacket. When they reached the shaft, the flames were just seconds behind. He shoved the children in and climbed in after them as the fire consumed the hallway like a mouth devouring memory. They emerged onto a mid-level rooftop awning, an architectural oddity never meant for human use. Miguel had known about it from the blueprints he'd studied years ago during an old patch job. Now it was a lifeline. The kids collapsed, coughing. Miguel leaned against the stone ledge, his chest heaving. He could see the fire now, in full. It was no longer confined to floors. It had become the building, a living, breathing entity of heat and fury. He needed attention, fast. He took off his janitor's jacket, tied it to a mop handle he'd carried from the shaft, and lit the edge of it with a flare spark. The smoke from it was dark, thick, different from the rising flames. He waved it wildly over the ledge. Down below, a firefighter spotted him. We've got movement, middle roof, east side. Another team mobilized. The children would be safe now. Miguel sat down against the wall, lungs burning. Just for a moment, he needed rest. But instead, he looked back at the fire and stood again. He wasn't finished. At a triage tent across the street, Clara Vega watched the building she'd inherited and neglected burn. She sat with the boy she'd rescued. He was asleep now, breathing easier, his small body wrapped in a fire blanket. But Clara couldn't sit still. Every siren screamed guilt. Every plume of smoke was a memory. She saw herself as a child, running down those hallways, her father laughing as he carried her on his back. Back then, the building had been more than marble and status. It had been home, alive, breathing, loving. Her father used to say, "Take care of the people and the building will stand tall." But Clara hadn't taken care of the people. She had seen profits. Now it was falling apart because of her. And the only one holding it up was the janitor she couldn't even remember hiring. A nurse came over. "Ma'am, you're safe now." Clara stood. But he's not. Miguel re-entered the burning structure through the lowest access stair he could find. Charred, cracking, still passable. His oxygen supply was nearly gone. He knew what he was doing was madness, but he also knew that a contractor had once turned the old second-floor mailroom into a temporary storage room and forgotten to remove the bunk partition. If anyone else was hiding, it was probably there, and he was right. 2 more residents, a young couple. She was limping. He was unconscious from smoke. Miguel broke open the false ceiling with his crowbar, revealing the old wooden crawl space above. It groaned ominously, splinters raining down like sawdust in a storm. "Climb," he told her. "I'll carry him." What if it collapses?" Miguel looked her in the eyes. "Then I'll hold it up." She climbed. He hoisted the man over his shoulders. Wood cracked above, a beam snapped behind. Flames licked at the edges of the wall. Miguel surged forward, muscles screaming, breath failing, but he made it. They tumbled through the crawl space and down the other side, just as the ceiling collapsed in a roaring, fiery avalanche behind them. And again, Miguel rose from the smoke, still standing, still fighting. Smoke parted, just enough for Miguel to see a sliver of the sky again, a streak of pale early dawn cutting through the gloom. First light. The fire had raged all night, but now morning was coming. Behind him, the couple he'd rescued were huddled together, wrapped in one of his soot-covered towels. They were alive, but barely, exhausted, silent. Miguel, scorched and battered, leaned over the broken window frame of a side stairwell. The building was creaking now, every surface moaning like an old ship taking on water. He waved a cloth, blackened and torn, from the frame. A spotlight snapped up from the street below. A voice echoed through a bullhorn. "We see you, stay put." Relief flooded him. They'd made it. Again. But even as that thought settled, he felt it, the floor trembling beneath him. Something was about to give. It started with a groan, then came the crunch of metal tearing. The center of the building, the core where the elevator shaft once stood, began to implode. The stairwell cracked. "Go!" Miguel shouted to the couple. "Get to the far end of the hall. Don't stop." They ran. He turned to follow, but the wall buckled. The hallway split in two. A section of the ceiling caved inward, and Miguel fell. Not far, just 1 floor. But it was enough. He landed hard, shoulder first, in a storage alcove now open to the elements. Concrete dust choked the air. Metal screamed all around him. His head spun. He tried to rise and collapsed again. Somewhere above, he heard his name. "Miguel!" A woman's voice. Clara's. The firefighters found him by accident. Clara had refused to leave the command tent. She kept insisting, "He's still in there. Keep looking." He wouldn't stop. The fire captain gave in. A second search unit swept the lower floors, and there, under a crumbling beam, covered in blood and ash, they found him. Still breathing, barely. They carried him out as the final flames devoured what remained of the 5th and 6th floors. Clara was waiting by the ambulance. When she saw him, broken, burned, unconscious, something inside her snapped. The walls she'd built her whole life? They crumbled with the building. She climbed into the ambulance beside him and didn't let go of his hand the whole ride. The fire made headlines. Janitor saves dozens in apartment inferno. Mystery man becomes unexpected hero in elite residential fire. Photos of Miguel, barely conscious on a stretcher, spread across news sites and TV stations. Witnesses came forward. Mrs. Epstein, the DeSantises, the kids from 309, all saying the same thing: he saved us. Reporters camped outside the hospital. Tenants organized food drives. Strangers sent cards. But Miguel slept through all of it. In a coma for 3 days, his body recovered inch by inch. Clara refused to leave his side. She wore no makeup, no designer clothes, just hospital scrubs and exhaustion. She stared at him like he held all the answers she'd spent her life ignoring. The first thing Miguel saw when he opened his eyes was light. Software warm, no smoke, no screaming, just light. And Clara, asleep in the chair beside him, her hand still gently clasping his. He croaked out, "Water." She woke instantly. "You're awake." He nodded weakly. "Feels like I got hit by a truck." "You saved people." His voice cracked. "They needed help." She looked away, tears finally falling. "I was supposed to protect that building. My family built it. I let it rot." Miguel smiled faintly. "Well, guess I did your job for you." She laughed through her tears. "Yeah, you did." The doctor entered. "He's going to be okay. Broken ribs, minor burns, dehydration, but nothing permanent." Miguel closed his eyes and whispered, "Tell that to my knees." The room filled with quiet laughter. For the first time in weeks, Miguel didn't feel invisible. He felt seen. The hospital discharged Miguel a week later, his ribs taped and arm in a sling, but walking on his own. Waiting for him outside wasn't a taxi or a bus, but Clara Vega standing beside a sleek black SUV, dressed in jeans and a simple sweater. No bodyguards, no personal assistant, just her. Miguel paused. "You're stalking me now?" he asked, arching an eyebrow. Clara smiled. "Consider me your unofficial chauffeur." "I don't think I can afford this ride." "It's complimentary," she replied. "And overdue." He hesitated, then climbed in. She drove in silence at first, then pulled onto a quiet overlook above the city. Below, the charred remains of the Aveline loomed like a skeleton. Miguel stared at it. "I've never seen it from this high," he said. "Not many do," Clara replied. "We live above it all, but we never look down close enough." She reached into the glove compartment and pulled out a thick folder. "Every inspection report you ever filed. I had the legal team dig through years of archives." He flipped through it, his handwriting, page after page. "I ignored all of this," she whispered. "I knew the building was aging, but I kept pushing off the work. Profits, appearances, the usual excuses." "You're not the only one," Miguel said, "but you're the only one who can change it." She turned to him, serious now. "I want to rebuild the Aveline the right way, and I want you to help lead it." He blinked. "You want me to?" "Not as a janitor, as a supervisor. Full authority over safety, repairs, staff, whatever you need. Name your salary." Miguel shook his head. "I'm not a manager, Clara. I'm a fixer. I patch holes and clean drains." "You're the only reason over a dozen people are still alive." He sighed. "I didn't do it for a promotion." "I know," she said. "That's why I trust you." By the time Miguel returned to his modest apartment, his mailbox was overflowing. Letters, drawings from kids, gifts, a sketch of him holding a fire extinguisher, signed by the children from Unit 309. He'd gone viral. Our Janitor hero trended for days. Clips of survivors crying on camera, praising him, flooded the media. Talk shows wanted interviews. Local radio stations played dramatic readings of eyewitness accounts. A documentary crew left 3 voicemails begging to film his story. He hated every second of it. At the hospital, he had smiled through it all. But now, back in the quiet, surrounded by praise he never asked for, he felt restless. The fame wasn't real. The people he saved were. He visited the DeSantises first. The old couple had been relocated to temporary housing across town. They wept when they saw him, hugging him tightly. "You saved us," the old man whispered. "You were an angel in the fire." Miguel smiled, but corrected gently, "No angels, just stubborn janitors." He checked on Mrs. Epstein next, alive, smiling, already baking again. "You're on the news, you know," she said. "You're famous now." He laughed. "I liked it better when no one remembered my name." That night, Clara held a small press conference in front of the Aveline's ruins. She stood on a makeshift platform, microphone in hand. "This building was once a beacon, and I let it fade. But one man reminded all of us what it means to care for something beyond ourselves." She gestured to Miguel, who stood just behind her, looking uncomfortable in a borrowed blazer. "He is not just a janitor. He's the foundation of what comes next." The crowd applauded. Miguel gave a small nod. Because he didn't want the spotlight. He wanted the work. 2 weeks later, Clara stood at the head of a long, gleaming conference table in a high-rise downtown. Around her sat a half-dozen board members, sharp suits, sharper tongues. They all looked tired, annoyed, and more concerned about insurance claims than human lives. "The public narrative is still in our favor," one said, "but that building's a liability. We cut our losses, file the claims, and walk." "No," Clara said flatly. Another scoffed. "Clara, sentiment doesn't rebuild concrete. The investors will follow my lead. I own the building." Silence. She looked each of them in the eye. "I'm rebuilding, and this time it will be done right. Every pipe, every wall, every circuit will be touched. No more cheap fixes." Someone muttered, "That janitor's gotten to her." Clara straightened. "That janitor did more for that building in one night than you've done in 5 years." The boardroom went quiet again. Clara placed blueprints on the table. New layouts, safer materials, emergency systems with backups, green space, common rooms, and at the bottom a name listed under lead facilities manager, Miguel Salazar. "This is non-negotiable," she said. "We owe it to them, and to him." Miguel didn't say yes right away. Clara met him at his apartment, contract in hand. "I don't need a title," he said. "I need tools and people who will listen." "You'll have both," she promised. He took the contract. "Read it. Full oversight? Yes? No red tape? Not if I can help it." He looked at her long and hard. "What's the catch?" "There's no catch," she said. "Just a second chance." 3 days later, Miguel stood in the skeletal remains of the Aveline, now wrapped in scaffolding and construction tarps. He wore a hard hat with his name stenciled on the side. He walked the ruins with a clipboard, nodding to engineers, guiding electricians, checking safety reports. No one ignored him anymore. He wasn't invisible now. He was in charge. That night, Clara visited her father's old office in the upper levels of her downtown firm. The lights were low, the air smelled of leather and old books. She opened a drawer and found it, an envelope yellowed with time. "For Clara, when you're ready." Inside was a letter in her father's handwriting. "You'll own things one day, buildings, land, but remember, the soul of any place is its people, especially the ones who are quiet, the ones who fix things when no one's looking. They are the spine. Honor them, and the walls will never fall." Clara read it 3 times. Then she folded it gently and tucked it into her purse. She had been blind, but not anymore. A month later, Miguel invited Clara up to the rooftop, but not just any rooftop. This one, above a low-rise annex building attached to the Avalon, was being reworked as a community space. Clara had seen the plans, signed off on them, but hadn't visited yet. Now she stood in the middle of it. New soil beds, potted herbs, repurposed wood benches, vines just beginning to crawl up lattices. Miguel walked beside her. "Started this year ago. No one came up here. I figured, why not plant something?" "It's beautiful," she said, surprised by her own emotion. "It's not finished." "Neither are we," she replied. They stood in silence, sunlight settling over the city. Word of Miguel's promotion spread quickly, but what spread faster was the change in how people treated him. He noticed it in small ways. Smiles from residents who used to walk past him, thank you notes pinned to bulletin boards, coffee left for him in the morning with his name spelled right. Even Curtis, the former floor manager, sent a clumsy but sincere apology. One afternoon, a teenager from the 8th floor approached Miguel in the lobby. "Hey, my mom said you saved us. We're grateful." Miguel nodded. "Glad you're safe." Then the teen added, "You ever need help with something, just ask. I'm good with tools." Miguel smiled. "I'll keep that in mind." People began treating him not just as a hero, but as a part of their community, a presence, a protector. He didn't ask for it, but quietly, with humility, he accepted it, because now he was no longer just the janitor. He was the man who rebuilt the heart of the building, one life at a time. It came in an envelope. No fanfare, no ceremony. Clara handed it to him after a site walkthrough, her expression neutral, almost casual. Miguel opened it. Inside, a set of keys. A short lease contract, Unit 3B, the Avalon. Rent, $0. Duration, indefinite. Occupant, Miguel Salazar. He blinked. "You're giving me an apartment." Clara shrugged, smiling. "You already rebuilt the building. Consider this, the rest of the foundation." "I can't accept." "You can, because this time it's not charity, it's home. You earned it 10 times over." He stood in silence, fingers tightening on the keys. He remembered how many years he'd walked these halls with no nameplate. How many times he'd fixed other people's sinks, while his own place had a leaking roof. Now he had a door of his own, a mailbox, a window facing sunrise, and for the first time in decades, he wasn't living below everything. He was part of it. It took 3 months, but the building came back. New marble, reinforced shafts, modern emergency systems, fire-resistant walls, solar panels, and at the center of it, a single elevator, completely rebuilt. Miguel stood in front of it one evening, toolbox in hand. Clara walked up beside him. Nervous? She asked. About a box on a pulley? Never, he said with a grin. She pressed the button. The doors slid open. They stepped inside. It rose smoothly, humming like a satisfied cat. As the elevator glided past each floor, Miguel glanced at Clara. "This feels familiar," he said. She smirked. "Last time I saw you in here, you were covered in soot and trying to save my life. And you were barking orders." "Still am." They chuckled. Then the elevator stopped. Between floors. Dead silence. They both looked at the lights. Miguel reached slowly toward the control panel, and then the lights flickered back on. The elevator resumed. Clara laughed, a real one, unguarded. "Had you gone for a second?" Miguel shook his head, smiling. "You're cruel." The doors opened on the rooftop. She stepped out. "Come on, you've got one more thing to see." The rooftop was quiet, freshly paved, lush with green from Miguel's garden boxes, a few benches, a plaque installed on the wall, gleaming under the rising sun. Miguel read it, "In honor of those who rise in silence, who work in shadows and carry others to safety. Miguel Salazar, you rebuilt more than a building, you restored what makes it home." He stared at it for a long moment. Then he sat on the bench beside Clara. Sunlight crept slowly across the skyline, illuminating the city in gold and steel. Below them, the Avalline stood tall again, scarred but strong, not perfect but alive. Clara glanced at him. "Still think you're just a janitor?" Miguel didn't answer right away. He just exhaled softly and smiled. "No," he said. "I think I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." They sat in silence, the city awakening beneath them. And for once there was no emergency, just peace and the promise of a new day.